Hello and welcome to The Letterbox, the channel where I talk about books and all things writing. I'm Sasha, a Ukrainian girl who lives in South Africa, and in this video we're gonna talk about all books I read this September. Please get yourself some coffee or some tea, it's too hot here now, so I'm just gonna stick with my water bottle. This month I continued my new habit of going to the library and picking up random things. It's chaotic, but it works for me, and as usually it led to some amazing finds this month. First book I've picked up was ta-da! Angel's Ashes by Frank McCourt. I swear that I knew nothing about this book before. I didn't know it's a movie by now. I didn't know it's a very much well-known memoir. Well, you can't judge the person who is yet to read Harry Potter. Anyway, it is worth the hype. It's raw, it's painful, and despite all the above, very funny. Here's a quote, for example. "The master says it's a glorious thing to die for their faith. And Dad says it's a glorious thing to die for Ireland. And I wonder if there's anyone in the world who would like us to leave." I don't know if it's your kind of funny, but it worked for me. I think that Frank McCourt did exceptionally good job with narrating the story through the eyes of a child. There's no moral lessons, no interpretation of what's happening, just a pure observation of a child. And yet sometimes these childlike observations, they speak to you more than any intentional attempt to teach you something. I can guarantee that you will remember the characters from this book, Uncle Pike eating, the girl from the hospital, they will all stay with me. And funny fact, I caught myself thinking that if I would read this book before I became the wife and the mother, I would probably, to some extent, sympathize with Frank's father. War damages people, it damaged him. In a way, he had these things about him, like telling his son stories, coming up with his ways of what dignity is. And it was, I don't know, I would sympathize with that. I don't know if it's weird, and yet I couldn't justify him now in my today's role. I couldn't justify and forgive his carelessness, his addiction from his family life perspective. Now let's move to the critique. The book produced quite a scandal, it seems, among Limerick people, Irish people, who were saying that Frank did quite a disgrace to his town and his own family. Apparently, his mother, Angela, herself called her son's memoir lies. I would say that there was, towards the end, almost a feeling like, okay, I get it, it was hard, like there was way too much misery and it felt a little bit repetitive towards the end. But even if the author did outstretch to beat the hardships of his childhood, I think he had a right to do so because it was hard nonetheless, and he's also an author who has his own perspective. Anyway, I really had intention of making this book video a little bit shorter, but there we go. Next book I read was The Cuckoos Calling by Robert Gallbraith, or as we all know by now, by J.K. Rowling. I was really looking forward to this series of crime stories, and it didn't disappoint me. I know that lots of people complain it's not the most lively and fast-moving crime story, but for someone who mostly looks for the atmosphere and characterization, I was quite satisfied. Again, that's one of my guilty pleasures, crime stories with a subtle romance line, especially if it's a slow burn line where I can pick up on the characters in the next book and the next book. It quite worked for me, it gave me exactly that. Also, despite the fact that text is, or probably rather dialogues, may seem a bit dry, J.K. Rowling is a skillful author and she gives the reader, in my opinion, lots of small bridges to catch a breath, and this actually was something I was trying to learn intentionally from this series of books, how to intertwine the past, the inside world of the character, what made them to be what they are today, not just info-dump it at some point, but rather weave it all together in a story, and also how to work with the long dialogues, giving people a break. Needless to say, I want more, and Silkworm is already awaits for me on the bookshelf. The third book I read this month was The Lost One by Anita Frank, which became my first historical Gothic story. The dictionary of this book is absolutely delicious. We have Stella grieving from the death of her fiancé in World War I, who with her maid Annie goes to stay with her pregnant sister Madeline in her husband's country estate. She finds her sister quite anxious. and lost and increasingly unsettled because she believes that the house is haunted and something is wrong with it. Well, whether it's haunted or not, that's what we're gonna discover in the book. You won't feel a great feeling of suspense while reading this book, just as again, it is rather a slow read. Somewhere halfway through, I had a thought of putting the book down. I felt like the story was way too slow and not as dynamic as I would like it to be, but I'm glad that it didn't, because it did pick up its pace on the second part of it, and I really enjoyed that. Well, if The Lost Ones made me a bit impatient, the next book made me almost lose it completely, and it would be Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susan Clarke. Guys, it's a huge book. First of all, I'm gonna insert the video here. Like, I'm talking about 1,000 pages, and I really have mixed feelings about it. I would really love to hear from you if you came across that book too. So the story is about magic, and particularly two magicians who had very different views on how magic is supposed to be utilized in this alternative 19th century England. It's written incredibly skillfully. It's incredibly well. The language, just as everyone promises you, gives you this Dickens vibe. And I can only envy Susan Clarke's ability to imagine and pay attention to the details. But I need to feel some sympathy for at least one character, like I can connect to at least one character. And until Jonathan Strange and Arabella appeared, I simply couldn't find a single one. And they appear like good way 40% in the book, and when we're talking about 1,000 pages book, that's a long one. The opening chapters rather felt like a parade of different gentlemen and names and circumstances and lots of explanations about magical history, and I couldn't just see behind them some living, breathing people I could relate to. I kept waiting for the moment when the real story would finally begin, and it took a long while. Everything changed for me once Strange entered the scene. His character, his restlessness, his hunger for magic made the, for me, narrative come alive. It made the story dynamic. It was especially fascinating to watch his relationship with Norrell, how the cold, withdrawn, dry Norrell gradually begins to thaw, showing traits that were contradictory. One of the scenes where he comes back and thinks that when Strange comes to Norrell and expects him to complain about the paper he releases, one of my favorite scenes. But then something happens to Strange, and he's kind of gone again. And I had to push myself again through another, 30% of the book. I even tried to read it in other languages to make it more entertaining, though that didn't quite work. And then Strange comes back, and the story as well comes back for me. So out of 1,000 pages, I was reading in a way we read fiction, emotionally involved, sympathizing, caring for the character, maybe quarter of it. That quarter was good, and it was worth it. Later, I finally realized that this book would be much better in an audio version, and I think it rescued me from getting the reader block with it. I finished listening to this book in audio, and if you're planning to read this book, I may suggest that it could be a better decision to rather listen to it. After all these rather hectic reads, I needed something lighter, something more entertaining, and I remembered that I have a copy of The Housemaid. I don't think I have to retell what's it all about, and I don't have really much to say from the fact that it is a very easy and entertaining what they call beach read. It's a page turner. You kind of see from the beginning where the story is going. You also see all the logical mistakes. Like, why on earth would you always interrupt the family affairs and their quarrels and conversations? Why would you go down to the family lounge you're working on late in the night to watch TV, again in the family lounge, as a maid in the house? Anyway, I had lots of questions. They're just the surface ones, but nevertheless, it was a fun read. Book number 6 was A Poor Season for Wales, written by Michiel Heyns. I hope I say the author's name right. And this one was the most unexpected surprise, similar to The Impossible Us from previous month. I'm gonna read you the intro. Margaret Crowley, handsome, clever and rich, with a comfortable home and a happy disposition, seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence, and had lived nearly 56 years in the world with very little to distress or vex her. It was therefore hardly to be foreseen that in her 56th year she would kill a man with a kitchen knife. You can only imagine what fun that story is. And no, it's not a crime story. just a very clever hook. First of all, I haven't paid attention that the story is written by South African author. Even more so, the story is starting at a cliff walk at Hermanus, a small town near Cape Town, one of my favorite holiday destinations. When we go there as a family, we have a tradition of waking up super early and getting to a particular bench there for sunrise coffee and sandwiches. And the book starts exactly at that cliff walk. Obviously, I was sold right away, but it wasn't just that. It's that characterization that's what caught me. Jimmy, one of the characters, was so unusual, so distinctly himself, so captivating. You feel like constantly bouncing between adoring him and hating him. I couldn't put the book down and ended up reading under blanket with a torch like a child, which annoyed my husband quite a bit. He wanted to sleep. Author's commentaries on social, cultural and political life of Cape Town was spot on. Everything felt so familiar, like a conversation with a well-known friend. I don't know, this book gave me so many warm goosebumps, even the mention of Irma Stern. It's a South African painter who I recently discovered for myself after visiting the gallery, and I instantly loved her picture. The only slightly negative comment I have is that Margaret's conversation, mostly with her friend and maybe a tiny bit with her son here and there, felt a tiny bit unnatural. Like, I couldn't picture people just casually talking in such a way, not once, not during a specific scene, not after having a couple of glasses of wine, but as a habit. But it was just a tiny thing. It didn't distract me from the story much, and still I loved this book, and I can't be happy enough about picking that. Book number 7 I read this September was Garden Spells by Sarah Edison Allen, and I loved the cozy magical setup of it. Again, my first magical cozy story. This book is like an apple pie, a chicken soup, a mug of hot chocolate, or any other, I don't know, cozy blanket, whatever cozy you can have in your mind. And it's actually hard to just describe what the story is about. I will just give you a rough setup. It's a small town, 2 sisters, traumas, memories, sprinkles of magic, and romance story. It's a mischievous apple tree who is a character itself. I particularly loved how author normalized magic. She makes it just as a part of people's lives, not as something extraordinary. It just purple lights here and there, it just scents, it just geranium wine for bringing happy memories and other incredible kitchen tricks and recipes. The only nay I had about this book, and very slight nay, is that sexual interaction between some characters felt a little bit unnecessary for me. In a way, it almost made the story be cheesy, downscaling it to the he put his hand on a wall trend, but it wasn't a huge nay, just a moment. The 8th book for this month was a non-fiction. It was a structuring a novel by Weyland. Without getting lost in the details, I would just say that I can definitely recommend it to anyone who starts their writing journey and wants to learn how to structure a story. It was very helpful, very useful, and very simple. The next book for this month was Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. I still have this book on, still haven't returned it to the library. And the story goes like this. What if you thought you murdered your best friend, and if everyone else thought so too? And what if the truth doesn't matter? It's a story about a girl called Lucy who had this very weird and strange story about her best friend's murder, and she can't remember anything about that night. And she moved to LA from Texas to escape all her past memories and the whole night and all her memories about that night. But now one very, very well-known podcaster, Ben Owens, decides to choose the story about her friend's murder. Her friend's name is Savvy, to investigate it for his 2nd season. She's forced to think again about everything what happened. She's forced to go back home and investigate, try to solve her friend's murder, even if she's the one who did it. This was another book I practically raced through. It's really funny. I've known plenty of self-absorbed men, but Nathan takes the cake. It's my favorite thing about him. I can't even remember the last time he asked me a personal question. When I told him that I've been married for 2 years in my early 20s, he said, "No worries, want to go to a movie?" So it's a very strong first voice narration. I like stories like that. They do the trick for me. I love characters about these books. They're easy, they're memorable. It's impossible not to fall in love with Lucy's granny and her 2 preferences of clothing. I wouldn't call it a thriller because presented so because they presented so, I kept expecting that the voice thing of the book will expand. Who knows, they know. And honestly, didn't really get the point of it with the way it got resolved. Also, it says here, Stephen King, a world-class whodunit. Not so sure about whodunit. It's again one of the stories where everything just gets kind of dumped in the end. And investigation part is not the strongest here, but the story was still nice. I think it's a nicely written book. It's fun to read. If you like books with strong and dynamic first-person narrations, short chapter, you will like this one. We are finally at our destination point, the book number 10, which is a collection of stories by Elisabeth Gaskell, Cousin Phillis and Other Stories. I actually didn't finish the last story yet, but it makes more sense to place it under September reads rather than the next month. It's my first account with this author, even though I heard about her quite a bit, and when you read it, you kind of understand that as much as we may compare today some other authors to, some modern authors to this Victorian recognizable voice, this manner of writing, they cannot actually do it. The whole value system, the way society worked, what was beautiful and ugly back then, you simply cannot place it in today's stories or minds. You have to live it and believe it. Some of them make me shiver, some of them give me a sense of longing and missing out something. I was really amused by Gaskell's gentle yet very much in-depth prose, and I definitely looking forward to read more of her stories. So this month's read was quite a mix, which is exactly what I love it to be. Different stories and different characters and different styles. And I already have my little stash for October. I am finishing the very thick biography on Beatrix Potter's life. And my next one is The Light Between Oceans. It's quite an old publishing. Then is The House at the Edge of Night by Catherine Banner. And the last one is Ask Again, Yes, but Mary Beth Keane. All of these were suggested to me by AI on my normal, on the set of preferences I've given it. So I'm quite excited to read it and find out whether I will really like it. My voice is dying. I have to say, I wouldn't read as much if this wouldn't be library books. The fact that they need to be returned back, they really motivate me to finish them and find time. Also, my phone keeps telling me week to week, like, you spent that many hours less on your phone and that many hours less on your phone, and it really makes me very joyful. Yeah. So go to the libraries, guys. For now, thank you so much for spending your time with me. Like and subscribe to my channel if you liked it, and let me know what was your favorite book from this month, and maybe what did you also read, where did your opinion align or did not with what I'm saying here. And I'm excited to meet you again in October. Until the next letter, yours S. Look how beautiful.